that's when they go, oh, let's invite them to our event. And it's a circuit and it takes time to build up. I would always emphasize consistency. Just stay in the game, make it part of your business plan. You don't have to travel 2, 3 times a month, but just stay consistent with it. And you'll
I love
continue to get
that.
more invitations.
So how do you turn your business into an actual brand? Well, my name is Bijal Patel, and I've had 13 years of corporate experience working at big Fortune 500 companies, and I'm taking all of that juicy firsthand experience and have brought it into my company Launch. Within this podcast, you're going to learn about branding, vision, identity, mindset, and how to scale your business to the next level. So let's go ahead and own your brand. Hey guys, welcome to the show. I'm so excited. We are going to be talking about how to get you some paid speaking gigs because I am a true believer that you and your brand needs to be out in the world and we need to get you compensated. I have my respected and dear friend, Gabrielle Gowd, with me today, and I'm going to just pass over the mic and let her introduce herself.
Awesome. Thank you, Bijal. My name is, Gabrielle Gowd, as you said, and I am a partner and chief of staff at Welch Equities, which is a holding company that also owns and started The Wealthy Consultant back in 2022, which Bijal is very familiar with. And so I've been working with Taylor Welch for the past 5 years and work primarily in events, operations, client services, finance, really anything that is more engaged in retention and back of house. Although speaking and podcast speaking on stages, as I like to call it, versus events, I think more internal. That's more front of house, obviously, getting the leads into your business from the front end. So that's the kind of across the spectrum, very broad range that I do. But I love the speaking and podcasts portion of that.
That's amazing. So I think, one of the things I think that I have seen in observation of knowing you for like the past 4-ish years is you have the ability to see where someone could make a connection with someone else in the first place. So like, I think it'd be so cool. And you and I have got to dialogue. You've actually helped me on this. You actually helped me get my first paid speaking gig.
Yeah,
so like,
I remember.
out. Gabrielle's like, where's my booking commission? No, girl, that's just love. Here it is. So how do you go about finding those opportunities? Like, how do you find that match? Like, what are you thinking about?
Absolutely. So the first step is always people that you know or who know you. That's going to get you 80% of the way and a lot less lift, more leverage. You're shaking your head. Yes. Like, obviously that's the first and natural place to start. So if you have a social media, if you have a Facebook group or you have clients of your own, friends, colleagues, you just start there. That is the fastest route. And typically it goes something like, hey, I'm opening myself up to start speaking and sharing what I know. If you have anybody or any podcast or platform that you feel like would be a really good fit, that they would get value from what I can teach, I'd love an introduction. And you keep it very obviously leaned out. You're not being you're not pushing, but you're just making that available. Or you can make a Facebook post. I've seen posts where somebody did, hey, like, I'm looking to do a podcast today in the next 30 days. Drop a comment if you know somebody or if you'd like to book me. And I am taking literally every podcast interview for the next 30 days. And I've seen hundreds of comments on a post like that. So that's a really easy, low barrier to entry way to get started. But obviously we all have our dream podcast or our dream speaking events that we'd like to be on. And so that's where you get a little bit more technical. I have a very intense master spreadsheet with like date of the event, the event location and the event manager and all the information that you could possibly need. And that's where you can dive a little bit more deeper into some of the strategies and tactics and how to connect with those people and find those events podcasts. And I lump them together. They're very different, actually. Podcasts, I think, are much easier to get onto, and that can lead to speaking events. A lot of events can be a little bit more challenging, and that's where you just have to have a just give yourself more time to develop the connection and build tenure within the events world, speaking world, and then you get booked for that. But to find events, speaking events, it's, I mean, pretty basic. Just start with Google and keep the terms broad, like, psychology events for 2024. And from there, you can narrow it down by your location, the
Mm-hmm.
state. You really just have to figure out what your niche is and what you're wanting to speak to or who you're wanting to speak to, and just go from there.
I
Um,
love that. Let me break it down a little bit because that's so much
yep.
gold right there. And it's like I love the fact that Gabrielle just gave away kind of like if you're just starting out, the path is to use your warm audience, which is why
Yep.
having a personal brand is so essential. Like
Mhm.
anyone who doesn't have a personal brand right now is like you this is the perfect time to start. Like no need to shame yourself. But if you do have one, you're already ready to get going with this, and that is use your warm market, post on your favorite platform, post on all of them if you want, but
Mhm.
usually people have one or two that they're most likely like live on, they're most active on, and just ask your audience to say, hey, I'm taking all speaking engagements, all podcasts for the next 30 days. Getting on the podcast is easier, and then from there it opens up opportunities to virtual summits, to live events, to then
Yep.
speaking gigs and all those different things. And then she broke down what would it look like if you actually just did want to speak live in person on someone's stage and get booked for that, is by just going to Google and being more formal with your search, using spreadsheets, using what your main industry or topic of zone of genius is, and then starting to chart out what are those events and those event managers. And I think that really
Mhm.
stood out to me because if you're wanting to speak at a much bigger event, there's going to be an event manager
Yep.
coordinating that, compared to a smaller event where it's still going to be the founder or the business owner or potentially an operator who's actually coordinating that event. So I think where I think we could start with that is that, let's say, probably our average person who's listening to this podcast, they're established in their business. They're not like, we don't really speak to people who are starting their business because
Right.
I actually don't want, if you are starting your business, I'm happy for you to listen and get excited, but like you should not be wasting a whole lot of time on building your brand. You should be building your offer and then marketing your offer. And yes, personal organic branding is a little bit of that, but this is not the place for you to start. So just caveating. So
Yep.
our listeners are more like at least at 20K revenue
Yep.
months, and then upward from there. So let's say it's someone who's got a brand, maybe they've been on some podcasts, they have spoken at some events, but they haven't gotten to the point yet where they get to be selective on what
Mhm.
podcast they're on or get the paid speaking gig of where that is. So I'd love to hear a little bit on like how would you recommend even thinking about that, and then potentially what is the strategy or the approach?
A couple different things. I mean, obviously, I've mentioned previously, I would start with podcasting and start with your relationships. And so they've been on that, and you just kind of you have to keep building. The more people see you, and this goes to your personal brand, the more people see that you're doing this, the more that they're going to say, "Oh, she is speaking. I need her." And then that content, obviously, you're posting it. So that's just the obvious route. Going back to the second piece is, again, starting your searches. I think not just doing a Google search, but you can also look to national organizations. So people specifically in your niche, they're actively looking for speakers, not just like, I mean, we know the big, the ClickFunnels events and those kind of events, but if you can get into an organization or an association, they're actively looking for somebody who's an expert in that field. So that's a really good starting point too. And then even going to, how do you connect with some of these event managers? Like you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
smaller events, it's the founder or the owner that's hosting the event. But these larger events, if you're wanting to get, really into the speaking world, they're going to have somebody who is paid and managing, and they're gatekeeping. So those can be a lot harder to get into.
Mm.
So that's where the associations are really effective, because they'll have their like contact us information on the site, whereas some of these other large events, that they're money makers, they're machines, like they are very strategic about who they choose. They're going to hide their information. They don't make it easy for you to find them, to contact them. Sometimes
Mm.
they'll have speaker submissions, but you're just going into a pool, like it's on their website. You're not getting their email to reach out to them or follow up. So you're just having to put your information out there on their site, and you may or may not hear back. So that's where there's several strategies that you can go into that I can, divulge into the rest of this podcast, but you can find their contact. You basically want to find the main host of the event. So like, what's the ClickFunnels event? The
Funnel Hacking Live.
Funnel Hacking Live. So Funnel Hacking Live is not a business. So you would have to know that ClickFunnels is actually hosting Funnel Hacking Live. So you would go to the bottom of the website page and find who owns that page or who is the company that's putting that on. And then that is where you can go find the email and search on LinkedIn for the actual event manager. And from there, you reach out and you build your follow-up process. And there's a whole strategy with that. But that's one of the ways that outside of just your group of contacts that you have to get to that event manager as you're building out the types of events that you want to speak. And then you can go hunt down that person. I say hunt because it's really like you're consistently like following up and finding out what they need and trying to find a way to start that conversation with them. It is easier than it sounds. It just takes consistency. So
okay.
I can dive into
That's so interesting to me is like this. I mean, I think anybody listening to this podcast who is a business owner knows what it's like to hunt. Like you have to hunt so you can make a sale. So I don't think anybody, I mean, if you're afraid of hunting, you should just turn this off because like, you're not going to make it in the world. I mean, people really like to glamorize the land of speaking and it is tough. It is tough as nails. Like each environment is different. Each event is different. Each room is different. The people in the room are different. Who spoke before you influences how your talk is going to go. Oh my God. And like, if you get the after lunch spot, just like, goodbye.
Or the last spot of the day can be really powerful if people are ready for it, or they are like, it's afternoon coma vibes.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's a thing. So and that's a really good point that you brought up is like, you want to be thinking, how does my talk work with the whole? So you want to get into the mind of the event planner and what is it that they're looking for? A lot of times events have agendas and themes. And so you're like, oh, I want to speak on this. Well, when you're speaking to this event manager, you want to say like what I'm speaking on, this, branding strategy, it's going to complement all the other speakers so that your audience will get that multiplication factor of like, your other speaker talked on, I don't know, advertising. I'm talking on branding, and your other speaker talked on copywriting, and all together they're going to work synergistically. So you also want to put yourself in the mind of the event planner when you're talking to them about your specific expertise of how does this benefit them? How does it benefit their event agenda and their audience?
I love that. So that makes so much sense. It's like thinking of it. So, getting on your hunter face and knowing that this is very similar to sales. And I say that because you can make a sale and getting a paid speaking gig is just like making a sale. It's actually
100%.
really cool. You're going to get paid and then you get to go have some fun, and you probably either love speaking already or you're on your way to love speaking. And I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's a chance to interact with a whole group of people, and there's a lot of high energy there. It is fun. You get a whole new set of following that you didn't have before by just being in that room. So I think that using that analogy of like, hey, you got this. These are lateral skills that you already have. So if you know how to prospect and you know how to get sales, you're going to know how to do this too. A question on that before we move into like I love that just that depth of knowledge you have from how synergistic it is and how do you play as a team player to create something cohesive. Right. But before we jump into some of the nuances there, one of the hesitations I have, and I realized it as you were talking, is like, I still have that hesitation of like, oh, is that annoying to the event manager to reach out to them like that? Like, oh my God, is that like a VA cold DMing? Right. And there's this like sense of like, am I going to be annoying? Is that something I don't
Right.
want to hear? What's your experience with that? How would you guide someone who's feeling that sense of hesitation?
Yeah, it's really a balance. I think ultimately it's about being a good person and always, 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 and I said it before, put yourself in their shoes. Think about what they're like. Planning an event is crazy. There's so many details. There's a lot of chaos that, they're managing a budget. They're trying to get the best speakers possible. They're trying to sell tickets. So if you approach them with that in mind, you are being considerate and thoughtful, and you are genuinely wanting to add value to them. There are three
Mm,
things, primary things that an event manager is thinking of: selling tickets. So they've got to make money, they've got to cover their costs. They need, if you are a big brand, you have a lot of followers, then having you on their roster helps them sell tickets. So that's
mm-hmm.
why that's like one of the angles is like, hey, I have a big following. That's very appealing. If you don't have a big following, that's totally okay, because if you have great content, the next thing they're thinking about is selling tickets at the next event. So if you just bring it home and their audience is like, "Oh my gosh, that was one of the best sessions I've ever had," then that helps them for their next event. So that's part of the pit. Like, obviously, you're pitching yourself before you're in that situation. But if you can say, this is amazing content, I'm going to teach them these specific things, they're going to walk away with this knowledge, then that content gives them confidence that it's going to be an amazing event and people will buy tickets for the next event. The other thing is they're watching that bottom line. So if you have a speaker fee, if you're willing to waive your speaker fee, if you are willing to do, I mean, there are a lot of ways that you can partner with event managers, like do a webinar before or after the event, or give them a portion of, like, if they'll let you pitch or sell something at their event, if you give them a portion of those sales. So those are three things that you can think through when you're first reaching out. So, not to be annoying, you said, I don't want to be that person. No, well, not, most people don't want to be that person. If they've built their business, they understand that feeling. We've all had the cold, spammy outreaches. So,
Mm-hmm.
in order to avoid that, you come from a frame of adding value and wanting to benefit them and wanting to find out what their pain point is. What is it that they need for this event? So typically, an outreach is very simple and very, like, you don't want to give them a wall of text, whether it's a LinkedIn message, Facebook Messenger, which I really like Facebook for podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
It's less formal, and I feel like I connect more quickly with people that way. Or if you have their email, an email outreach, and it's very short and sweet. My name is this. I have this expertise, and I train people XYZ. I love what you're doing with your event, and I'd love to have a conversation with you to see how I can wow your audience and help support you. And so it's just a very simple message. I have had some event managers thank me. And I mean, this is like a year of follow up, once a
Mm.
month, just a little, hey, bumping it. I know email gets crazy. Just in case you missed your email, just bumping this message. Very polite. Like, hey, if you want to, I've done different things. I don't know how effective this one is, but hey, if you want to do a coffee date sometime, I'll send you a Starbucks card if you want to have a quick 15-minute chat and discuss. I respect your time, but want to connect on this real quickly. So unless you get a we are fully booked or no, we're not interested, a lot of times people are just busy and they miss it. They miss the
Yeah.
outreach. So if you're spammy or if you send them a wall of text and an email, that's when you're annoying. But if you're truly considerate and you're saying, I want to help you, I want to know how I can help you, I've got this thing, I really think it's a fit, or hey, I see Bijal speaking at your event and I teach something that is complementary, like using that too. Like if you have people that you know who have or are speaking at the event that they already have a connection with, then you've got that connection with them. They trust and respect that person. It kind of gives you some relevance. So it's really just being a good
Yeah.
person, wanting to help them, finding the pain point, and then just not being weird about it. It's just a follow up. It's a nudge. Every, it could be a couple of weeks, could be once a month, depending. And so I've really haven't gotten people be like, you are annoying, go away. I've had more
I
people
I
say,
just can't even. I can't, there's like, I was just thinking that as you were talking, there's no way because of your charisma in the situation is like, you're really good at learning people and navigating people. And that's what I think is amazing about what you're sharing is like, there's some total tactical gems here of exactly what you can do. Speaking
Yeah,
like a true operator, I'm like, this is such a treat. I'm usually talking to like other visionaries and we are just like in the clouds. We're like,
yeah,
it's
which is
this,
great.
it's that. We're charging in like there's this like there's almost no tactics, like I have to remember to actually give the tactics. And this is just great. This is like, hey, here's a 3-step process on how to get yourself
I
booked. And
know.
this is what the person is thinking. So I love that. And I think one of the frameworks I like to use is that the person who's afraid, if you're afraid, guys, of being the annoying person, it's not you.
Yeah,
Like the person
it's
who
probably
is
okay.
annoying, the person who is spammy, they have no self-awareness that they're annoying or spammy. So
Right.
you just by the fact that you have a little bit of that fear, I'm just letting you know it is not you. Like if
You're
you have
probably okay.
imposter syndrome, it's not you. It's all the people who don't have that are okay just gallivanting. So
Good point.
that
Yeah.
leads me then to you speak so confidently, and I can feel the certainty from your energy, and I know your history too. You've
Hmm.
obviously planned like so many dozens, maybe hundreds of events at this point in time. You've been the mastermind behind it. You've planned a lot of different types of events that were client focused, client
Hmm.
fulfillment, and then acquisition focused. Other
Yep.
ones that were destination, things that were virtual, things that were local and national. And there's like, you just have so much experience bench there. To me, it makes a lot of sense that when you're saying the key words that stuck out to me is like, think about where you can provide them value.
Hmm.
And besides the basics of like, oh yeah, they need to sell tickets and they want to make sure everyone, feels like they got a lot of value and that the content actually trained their people. That's all good. But like, what are some of the other things you've learned in throwing so many of your own events that event coordinators and managers and people who are busy juggling other things are
Yeah.
looking for in a speaker, and they're willing to pay someone who's willing to bring those to the table?
Yeah. I think what people are will okay, so having thrown so many events, usually we know our speaker roster. We already know so many people that we can pick and choose. So that's why I say start with people you already know or people who can refer you, or if you know someone speaking an event, that can be a foot in too, because a lot of times they already know kind of who they want to work with because they've heard them speak before. But sometimes, and going back again, this brand, it really is so important. Taylor will get booked to speak for something, or we will want someone to come speak on our event because we want to build relationship with them. So,
Mm.
outside of just the event or making money or selling tickets, events are such a great relationship builder, and it's worth
Mm.
investing or paying that speaker fee for proximity. And that goes both ways, whether you're going to someone else's stage or you want to build relationship with somebody on your event. So that's another really important point of, the kind of people that you want to collaborate with. A lot of times you can get paid, or it might be wise to bypass your speaker fee if you do get invited, because you can get in that room and then you can get to know other speakers and you can build a relationship, and from that partnerships can happen. So again, that there's a lot of value in events outside of just the curriculum, the teaching, the audience, the clients, getting leads, collecting leads. A lot of times that's the next step up, is like, who are you in the green room with? Who are you going to dinners with and having great conversations with? So we would pay for that. And we do pay for our speakers, like all their travel and stuff. But a lot of times we're not paying a speaker fee because they're friends or
Hmm.
acquaintances or people in our circle. So that piece, I can't gauge how important that is for other events. I just know that's what it is for us. I do know that Taylor has been paid to, he's going to Fiji in August, primarily because of, I think, the future relationship that will come out of that. obviously his training is amazing and important and,
Yeah,
jaw dropping. But I think there's that piece too in this industry. And it's so important once you start to just be consistent, because the more, again, the more people see you on the event circuit and traveling and you're posting stories and you're like, hey, what's up? We're with Garrett Gunderston. We're with Bijal Patel. That's when they go, oh, let's invite them to our event. And it's a circuit and it takes time to build up. I would always emphasize consistency. Just stay in the game, make it part of your business plan. You don't have to travel 2, 3 times a month, but just stay consistent with it. And you'll
I love
continue to get
that.
more invitations.
That's a really good point. I would have never, even having thrown my own events and having done what you said, I just forgot that that was totally strategic.
Yeah.
Of like the people you invite to speak on your stage is like, yes, will they help sell tickets? Some of them, but were some of them specifically for the relationship building
Yep.
side? I think that's super important. And I'll say this, like, if you don't have a personal brand that's like stratospheric yet, that is okay. It is totally okay. Think about your peers. Who
Mm.
are the people that are rising stars at your peer level? And that's something
Yes.
that I've been speaking kind of more into is like you I know comparisonitis, everyone knows about it at an intellectual level, but when you are throwing your own events or speaking on other people's stages, because you can get a lot of imposter syndrome when you're then speaking on the same stage as someone who's like maybe in a different category. But if you look at it from the perspective of like you're stepping into your stardom and you own your individual lane, you
Yes.
understand that it really doesn't matter, because sometimes somebody who's got an out of this world brand is also not as relatable. And so when they talk about their learnings, it's very aspirational, but you're still kind of like, the audience is like, but what does that have to do with me? Like, I'm just trying to
Mhm.
hire my second person. I haven't had 5 exits. And
Right.
so there's going to be an opportunity for you when you do take that step, put yourself out there, ask for the gig, and you're wondering, how are you going to share a stage with these people? People also need people who
Yes.
are earlier in their stardom. So there's relatability. And I think relatability creates connection.
Yeah.
And so
That
when you create
vulnerability.
yeah, exactly. And when you
Mhm.
create that connection, then people can start to feel like they got a lot of value from what you spoke, because then they can go back and apply it. So that I love that, using also the event circuit and the relationships to continue to build your network forward. And that's how you're going to find the same people to come back onto your stages.
Yep.
So, is there anything you would add there? I'm going to hop to the next next topic.
No, I think that's great. The vulnerability piece or relatability piece is so important because that's where people connect. Like I think of aspirational, it's the thing that they want to become. And we need some of that. We need to show them the way, like you can achieve this, you can do this. But there's also getting down on eye level with somebody and being really raw and honest that is transformative. So
Mm-hmm.
just, I don't think people need a hero on the stage as much as somebody that gives them hope of like, oh, you've been there before too. I can do this because you've done this. So I think that's really important, and not to count yourself out. Like everybody has a particular voice, a particular way of speaking or teaching something or perspective. So yeah, it is important not to discount yourself. I don't think the best speakers are necessarily the biggest audience.
Yeah, totally. And I think we're picking onto something, and I'm picking up on something. And I've mentioned this before, I'm sure, on this podcast, of like, I think the trend is shifting. And so, kind of what we saw, the hypiness of like when events came back on the scene around like 2022, there was like a
Mhm.
big pickup after COVID of events were back on because it was taken away from us. So, what happens? We had COVID, we couldn't see each
Yep.
other, and boom, late 2021 in 2022, everyone's doing an event. So you
Mhm.
had all these big names, and the big names, because there's big names, there's big audiences, and there's hundreds, if not thousands of people. The big names are going to focus on things that are very aspirational and motivational. So there is no
Yes.
slides, there is no tactics. It is motivational hype. And people went crazy for it. It was awesome and it
Mhm.
was fun for a while. But I think moving into 2025, 2024 and the rest of 20 and what we'll see in 2025 is that people are now like, I don't need like the motivational hype. Like I'm a business owner. I've already done some of that. If I want hype, I can go watch it on YouTube. What I'm
Right.
actually looking for is somebody who's teaching me something different than the way I've learned it before, or somebody whose brand I've been following for a long time and I like believe in their values and I'm connecting with what their message is. And lastly, I want to workshop what it is that they're doing in the moment that they're speaking. So I've
Mhm.
noticed that a lot of the best speakers have sort of adapted their messaging instead of like the top down, like I am guru, hear me
Right.
roar. It became this anti-guru culture. And now everyone's like, we're just bros and we're
Yeah,
just friends. And
people
look at how
too.
I messed up. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's super powerful. It's like pulling back the curtain behind the scenes because everybody struggles. Everybody has imposter syndrome. Everybody, I mean, we have our mastermind with 100 business owners in it. And the conversations in the private calls is like people are really dealing with imposter syndrome and fears and financial issues. And so if you are only hype, then it's almost like you're out of touch.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, yeah, it's really important to be authentic.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree. And so that's another opportunity to say, hey, this is your time to put your name in the hat and to go give it
Mhm.
a go and then to remain consistent with it. Because once you enter into the speaker circuit and people start to see you with, and I highly recommend this. I did this for the first speaking engagement I have because someone taught it to me and I would have never known and I would have never spent money on this. But someone reminded me to make sure that I was going to get my own recording of my talk so I
Mhm.
could splice it up and use it for social media, clip out the reels, put it as a part of like, a speaker sizzle reel. But I also was recommended to like hire my own photographer to make
Ah,
sure that they came and they shot some branded
mhm.
photography beforehand and shot pictures, like actual pictures of me in the room and that were professionally done where the
Yep.
focus was on me speaking and then the focus was on me speaking from the back so you could see the rest of the room. And having that type of collateral is so important for your
Yes.
brand because a picture speaks 1,000 words whereas you think that you've been asking for your podcast opportunities, you think you've been asking for your speaking engagement, but people are just busy in their own lives. And while they might think you're incredible, they haven't cemented in their mind yet that you are a speaker and that you are open to speaking. So talk a little bit about that when you approach people to maybe flip it in the other inverse, when you approach people to speak on your stage, are some people sometimes surprised that you ask them?
I don't know that I don't know that I've had people surprised because again,
Mhm.
we do have a broad network. So we're pulling from people, even some of our clients. I mean, Bijal, we're doing an event with you in September. So typically there's excitement. I don't know about like
Mhm.
shock, but more like
Mhm.
I'm so honored. I'm so
Yeah.
excited. I get an opportunity to share my expertise in front of whether they're, other chamber members, other colleagues, but usually it's just that like I'm honored, I'm excited, I can't wait, I'm going to bring my very best. Or they've done a lot of speaking before and they're excited just to get to hang out with the crew. Like the speaking is almost secondary. It's more like we're so excited to get to hang out. Like we just did this event in Charleston and had Garrett Gunderson and Taylor and Kevin Rogers, one of the best copywriters. And so it's like that's where the magic happens. So um, what's another way that you could ask that? I'm trying to I get to
No,
the
I think that that gives insight into where you are. I know from people who've spoken on your stage, they were
oh
absolutely
yeah.
like shocked and appalled, and they felt super over the moon, and they were like totally giddy about it. So I think
Yeah,
that it depends on again how used to you are with speaking, how you sort of judge like where you are. But I think that the point
that
to
makes
drive
sense.
home there the point to drive home there, though, is that like I know when I've thrown events before, people are very excited to hang out at the speaker's dinner. People
Yeah,
are like super excited to connect with each other.
VIP.
VIP, and I
Yeah.
swear, like those are some of the funnest. Like it's like going to an event and then speak and going to the speakers dinners, the ones that I've hosted and the ones that I've also been a part of,
Mhm.
are like transformative.
They
So it's
really
like
are.
you're in a room and you're giving, and it's awesome to be able to speak into people and like be the authority in your subject
Mhm.
matter. But then when you're at the speakers dinner, you're rubbing shoulders with people that you didn't have a contact with before,
Right.
and you are now getting closer to them, becoming friends with them. And so I don't know, how do you view, like, when you've been out and you've gone to so many events with Taylor, how do you view the whole speaker dinner circuit, and how does that advance your personal brand, your business
Mhm.
brand, partnerships? What's kind of a behind the scene look into that?
Yeah, I think it's just you make the real and genuine connection because social media only tells so much of a story. Your copy and your photos, but when you sit down and you're having dinner, or if it's a mixer and you're getting to connect with the clients, like that's when the real person gets to connect with the event host or the business owner, and you get to talk about the real problems or the real things or just shoot the breeze. But that's when, I mean, that's to me my favorite part. That's the magic, is like whether it's the dinner or the cocktail hour or whatever, like speaking on stage is a high. It is a lot of fun to have an audience held captive and to be able to share what you know. But it is that behind the scenes, whether it's like 15 minutes before you go on and you're just hanging out behind the curtain or in the back room, it's like those connections and conversations. I feel like that builds those relationships, and you just don't know what will come of that. Maybe a year and a half down the road, you do end up in some form of partnership, or that person has another friend or another connection doing something similar that you can connect on. So, like you said, it's the best part. Those dinners are so
Yeah.
much fun to be a part of. And that's another reason to really pursue these events, and even traveling, as inconvenient as it can be, but to travel to some of these events and to take the time away from your business, you are building relationship. And that's why it is important to be strategic about who you pursue and what you go after, because that can be your next group of friends or your next mastermind or your next partnership. And
Yeah.
usually I some of the conversations are around business, but a lot of times it's just family, and it's how are you balancing, different pressures or family with your business, or just really good honest conversations and lots of laughs. I feel like too. Typically everybody that I've met in this circuit, like they're genuine people. They're trying to do good in the world to help their clients. And so it's just a good crowd to get into, and to get to meet these other speakers or the hosts of the events.
That's awesome. I love that takeaway, because I think that was that, to me, the speaker's dinner has been kind of like the hidden gem of like what I
Mhm.
did. I thought it would be so cool to speak on stage and be able to influence a big group of people and get to feel the roar of their energy, and I like to make people laugh. So like have like a roaring audience. That was all fun and that was
Yeah,
super cool.
great.
And people afterward who like love your training, or they're crying, or they feel moved, and like they've
Yep.
changed in a real transformative way. But the speaker dinners I have experienced have been changing on a completely different level, of where you're actually more of like the participant in,
Yes.
and to get to meet some other people, spend closer time to them. And that's where I think where the sharing of the stage starts to equalize, where like you may not have where they are with their personal brand, or their number of followers, or
Right.
how much experience they have, or their revenue. But there is something that's unifying about being like, hey, well, we both, or all of us, poured into this audience together. And some of the absolute best soul shaking moments I've had have been at speaker dinners, where somebody who was way ahead of me took a moment to stop and just pour back into me and say, I heard your talk. I thought it was awesome. Hey, can I offer you something? And
Yes.
that's when you're like, yeah, cool. Wow. Okay. That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely want to hear that. And those have been moments that I think where you get a lot of insight into what is your speaking style. And just like in business, there's always going to be the next step. There's always going to be the next place that you go, the edits you make. There's always going to be something that you're looking to try or improve, or stylistically you
Mhm.
may want to play around with something, because it's a very creative process. So those have just been absolutely just mind blowing. Some of the funnest moments too, and
Oh yeah.
um, places where things have gotten sticky too, and we've had some pretty intense conversations that
Yep.
are real, that have opened up conversation to impact and like what actually drives the role, what actually matters. So thinking back to like Charleston, which was just like a week ago, it feels like a million
I
years
know.
ago.
I know.
It was like a week ago, but we got to have Garrett. I got to have Garrett Gunderson on our podcast.
Hmm.
And that was because I met him at a previous event that Taylor Welch and Dan Martell threw together. And
Hmm.
Taylor invited me to come to that event. And Garrett was a speaker there. And literally by proxy, I wasn't speaking there, but
Right.
just because I was at the event and the event was small, it was Dan's Empire Builders event, and
Hmm.
there was only 20 people. I
Yep.
ended up meeting him, and I clicked with him really well. And then I realized, oh, he's now speaking at this event. And so I was like, oh, I should just go ahead and shoot my shot. So we shot one podcast, totally failed. Riverside, you didn't record. And then we shot it again the second day. And it just gave us some more time together. And that proximity has actually led into a relationship. Like
Yeah.
that wasn't my plan. That wasn't my intention. I was like, oh, I think it's so cool that we're going to get to do that. But the banter between like the fact that it didn't record, our second one was so much better. So
Right.
it's amazing the relationships you build when you're willing to go not only speak at the events, you're willing to ask other people to speak on your stage, you're willing to ask people to be on your podcast, you're
Hmm.
willing then to also be a part of the audience and attend the events. And I think a lot of people forget that like it's okay to be an audience member too. Like you can speak
Absolutely.
and you can host your own events, you could
Yeah.
also go and attend. It's all opportunities for you to be able to spread your own brand. I think Charleston was just such a an
Hmm.
event where there was just like Eli Wild was just in the crowd, like he wasn't
Yep.
even speaking, he was
Yep.
just hanging, he was just there. So it's like so cool to see the community that you guys are building, and I cannot wait for our event September
I
12th and
know.
13th. Launch is throwing an event with the Wealthy Consultant. It's going to be in San Diego, so mark your calendars for that. It's going to be total fire. We're going to be focused on branding. It's going to be absolutely sick to collab on that together. So mark your calendars. We're going to start selling tickets for that soon. But let's wrap it up with a few kind of tactics of like you're there. So like having now spoken at events, like a lot of events are 2 days. And if
Hmm.
you're a mom like me and you've got kids, or you're a dad and you have a business, how do you kind of approach when you've got like a 2 day event and the speaker dinner is the night before? How do you approach negotiating that? Like, I come in at this time, but I'm going to leave by this time. Because I know I have been challenged by like, how much do I actually stay? What is the thought process there?
Yeah, so I feel like most event managers are understanding. So typically, if there is for a 2 day event, let's say it's a Thursday, Friday, there's typically a welcome mixer or a welcome dinner on Wednesday night, the night before the event, or there's a dinner on Thursday night. Sometimes it's Friday. This isn't exact, but for the most part, it's the night before the event starts or the night in between the 2 days. So I'll find out when that is and if they want us to attend and be there for that. And so then it's just the conversation of like, hey, we are taking time away from our business, taking time away from family. I can commit one full day. We'd love to be there for the dinner the night before. Would it be okay if we fly in like like Wednesday afternoon at 4, hit the dinner, speak Thursday morning, and then we'll fly out Thursday. So you're really only doing 24 hours, but that way you're there for one day of the event plus the extra, whether it's the mixer or the VIP or the speaker dinner. So it feels like you're there for more time, but it's really just 24 hours. Ideally, if you can be there the whole time, that's fantastic because you can mix and mingle and connect with the audience, connect with everybody, and really develop relationships. But you still have to think about your time, like your hourly rate. If you are out of the business for 2 full working days, then you want to consider like what is the value of the event and that stage. And so that just for me, operations finance, that's kind of more of a numbers thing. It's a feeling, not necessarily exact math, but you do have to be realistic of like I'm time away from family, time away from the business. How do we maximize and hit as much as possible? And I
Yeah.
find that most people will be flexible. So if it's like the event starts Thursday, but the dinner's Thursday night, hey, we'd love to fly in Thursday afternoon, hit the dinner, speak Friday, and then fly out. And that way your weekend is preserved for your family. And I've
Yeah.
never had any issues with that. That has always been very graciously received and everybody's been happy with it.
That's awesome. I think that's really great. I think there's some people who do like the Thursday, Friday events. Then there's a world where they do the Friday, Saturday events, and
Yes. Yep.
that is challenging. And,
Mhm.
as somebody who's spoke at a decent amount of events at this point in time, I can say that it's also exhausting from an energy level too, of
Very.
like,
Yes.
if you are speaking, you're looking at about 10 times as much more energy compared to if you're attending an event, and you have to go back home after that. And so if you
Mhm.
give it all out at the event, it's potential that you could be sick, or you could just be totally out of pocket when you come
Right.
home with your family. So that
Mhm.
might be something to look at, of like negotiating the one night in and one
Yes.
day out. Does that affect at all, would you say, if you are at an event and you are selling, like, is there a world in which you're getting a booked speaking gig, but then you're also aiming to sell? Or is it mostly like, if you're already getting paid? Because I've heard too from other people
Mhm.
that if you're getting booked to pay, if you're getting paid to speak, then that's kind of your fee and you're good. And if
Yep.
there's a freebie or a lead magnet, awesome. Maybe there's a webinar. Maybe they're going to email your list and then you can have them follow you on social, but then you're already being paid for your presence.
Yes.
Or it's on the opposite side where you're not being paid to speak. So there is a little bit more of a soft sell happening. Is there a world in which that there's both? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I find that most events do not want you pitching, especially if it's a hard sell. And you've probably come across that too. Like a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
these events are put together so the host is selling something. They have a mastermind or a product. So typically they don't want that competition, even though they may fully believe in you and your product. So that is where the speaker fee is how you get paid. And a lot of times we'll forego a speaker fee and say, okay, great. Like we need to make sure that the time away from the business is worth it. And everybody understands that. So, what if we did a webinar with everybody that's like, it's a free webinar, it's a value add to everybody attending. They've already bought their ticket, they're getting the event. But after the event, we'll do a special training. And on that webinar, then you can pitch your products, but it's after the event. So, it's not in competition. So, that's one way that you can make it a win for them. Also, if they're on a budget for their event or they've already spent all their speaker fee funds, then that's another way that you're like, hey, I want to make this work for you. I don't, I'll forego the speaker fee or I'm not going to pitch. Um, Another thing is a lot of times you have 45 minutes to an hour. So you don't have enough time to really get into what you would want to fully teach to lead them to their solution. So you're just hitting the top of the iceberg. So another really good way, you mentioned this lead collect, is you teach them the 45 minutes and then you say, hey, I could not get into all of this. If you would like the rest of the training, here's a QR code, here's a link. And if you have the training from your clients or previous event, you can give that away. And then that obviously they're opting in, they're on your list. You can have your, sales team start calling them and connecting. And so that's another way that you can kind of recoup any costs that you're out of the business by collecting the leads and selling them outside of the event.
Cool. That's awesome. Okay. Few rapid fire questions as we wrap up this pod. Full of value. So good. I learned on here, and that's always what is super fun about hosting badasses like you, Gabrielle. Okay. Few rapid fire questions. All right. So let's say you are like still stepping into your stardom. You have spoken at some free events and you want to, like, you feel solid on your message, you feel solid on your ability to wow an audience and give value. What is a good range for asking for a starting speaking fee?
I would say anything under $5,000 when you begin. And so that could be $2,000, $5,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. I think anything under that is pretty fair. And it just really comes down to your confidence level and what the budget for the event is. So again, if you're going to different like EO, entrepreneurs organization, they already have a budget. And so you can command more of that. It really just comes down to who you're approaching and targeting and what their budget is. And then if you feel like I am giving the specific training, the audience is walking away with tactics, action steps, something that like they would pay for training for online, then I think that that is another piece that can back up and support the request for your speaker's fee.
I like that.
I've heard when you get into, like collegiate coaches, then you're like in that 20 to 50K range. Presidents are like 200K. So there are these definite like categories that you fall into when you host your own events, and then you're going out to speak at events and you have your own business and your own audience, then you're in that like 10 to 20K range. So
That's
just
perfect.
starting out 2 to 5K is a nice sweet spot.
That's awesome. That's good to know. And then I think that a lot of times the event hosts, even if you're not getting paid, are willing to cover, your travel, and they're willing to cover your board of when you get there and stuff like that. So there is a way still to kind of offset what the costs look like, and then look at the relationship that's going to be developing from doing that. So that was really helpful. And then when you're looking at cadence of like, how many, like someone might be a busy parent, like how often should they be looking? What's a good cadence for them wanting to book out speaking engagements? So when you're thinking about that, I heard a lot of like time away from the business, like what seems like a good metric? Like, is it once a month? Like, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say if you can podcast twice a month and then travel for an event once a month, that's a decent amount of time on other people's platforms without leading you into fatigue and exhaustion away from the business. Like you said, like your energy output is so much higher. So you need time to recoup that energy. I think twice a month traveling is actually a lot. So once a month is solid. You're still getting out there. You're making those relationships, connections. You're getting exposure to the other audience, but it really still protects your energy. And then podcasts are really simple because they're at home in your, you're not traveling. And so that, or virtual events are similar to a podcast in my mind from energy output. So we've done podcasts once a week, and that can be a lot just because of calendar management and meetings and schedules. So the twice a week feels like a really good cadence for the podcasting.
Twice a month. Yeah. Yep.
Or twice a month.
Yeah, because that's you being a guest on someone's podcast.
Right.
Because then you have your own podcast that you're also doing.
Yes.
Hi. I dealt with that. I was like, what is, like there's more than you think that meets the eye there. Okay. Yes. So once a month traveling for speaking at an event, twice a month being on someone else's podcast. And obviously in-person podcasts are just really like ramping up. So you guys should totally check out our episode that we had with one of the number one podcast producers and shows in the world right now with Renee Warren. She's an amazing podcast, We Wild Women. She's actually the wife of Dan Martell, if you know him. And so check out that podcast. She literally breaks down exactly how you should approach like your podcasting strategy. But in there, she talks about in-person shows and like even bumping up the cadence to twice a week. So cool to see how that is really shifting right now in the space. And then last question on when you're looking at events, because this is $1 million question, and I say it for laugh on purpose. $1 million question. How do you pick which event is going to ROI you the best, whether it's a return on your investment of time or a return on your investment in terms of influence, return on influence in terms of you building your audience? How do you go about assessing and judging what that speaking engagement looks like as you're having to pick just one per month?
That is a great question. I feel like there are so many factors that go into that decision that I can't give a formula, as much as you have to think through the value of the person in that stage to you specifically, right? Like, is it your niche where that audience is going to be hot leads for you versus you could go speak on, I don't know, a finance stage and it may not be as hot for you, but there might be some people on the speaking roster that you want to build a relationship with. So it comes down to the relevancy of the event for you. and or the behind the scenes, the group of people that you'll get to meet and hang out with and talk to. So the audience may not be your prime audience, but the hosts and the other speakers may be people you want to build a relationship with. So there's no formula. You may have a formula. I'd love to hear it if you've cracked that code, but
Not cracked the
I think it
code.
really, and it's not even the size of the event all the time. It really is, what is your
Yeah.
personal enjoyment too? Do you enjoy this kind of crowd? Do you enjoy these people? Because we've been to big events with thousands of people and went home kind of like, great. We showed up, spoke, and left. And then we've been to these 100-person events that are just the best because of the people that were there. So it's not always like the biggest, the baddest, pay me the most money. It's the value to you personally. And
I love that.
what comes out of that. And we try to stay away from transactional decisions and more relational. Again, the benefit for obviously the audience, but for us as well on the relational front.
I like that. That keeps your expectations in check. I think you answered it the best way possible. I would say my input into like what one is knowing your intentionality of when you're entering in a room. Like if you are going to have a return on your investment in terms of you're capturing leads, then you really need to approach either the person throwing the event, if that's a business owner, the founder who's throwing it, or if it is an event person, you need to be really clear on what your intentions are so that they can back and support. That's what you're looking for. And I think that you could have a back end deal where you're having something that's a joint venture or something that's split, or you're sweetening the pot for them and making sure that while you are soft pitching or spending the 2 days in that space, they are aligned with you on what your intentions are. If you're going for a return on your influence and you want to build where your influence is, I think in that type of room, in that type of space, you're looking at what your relationship is to that person who's running the event or who's the main speaker. And you're doubling down on what your relationship back in with that person is. And you're looking for every pore in which you can put more value that was unexpected and surprising. And they didn't quite think that that is what they were going to get. So I think the element of surprise is a big deal because it causes people to pay attention. But when you approach it from that point of view, you can really just kind of go in with the like, open up your heart and spirit and just get, like a lot of speakers talk about just letting the downloads come through you. Like you just open it up and you're a vessel. And that is to me, anytime I've got a few standing ovations in my speaking career thus far. And the coolest thing has been is when I just left it all on the floor and there wasn't all of this like thought process and scientific placement of this thing and that thing. It was just raw and authentic and allowing the message to come through me rather than me being the one who's trying to guide and control. I just surrendered to the speaking and just went for it.
That's so good. Yes.
I love it. Thank you, Gabrielle, for joining us. This was awesome. Guys, I just can't encourage you enough. Gabrielle has many, many tricks up her sleeve. This is just one I asked her to speak on. So we are going to drop her links for you on social. She's also an amazing operator. And so if you're like me and you are wondering how in the world do you get this to work with quote unquote number two, they're also called integrators, they're also called scaler. How do you develop that relationship? I think she's another great one to follow if you're looking to understand that relationship better, because I think it's absolutely beautiful what you and Taylor have built together. And I've told you many times privately, but I want to say it publicly, that you are literally his favorite, and it'll go down in the record that you have been his right-hand woman when it comes to business. And he is very loud about that fact. And he's very appreciative of the relationship you guys have built. And I can just see that the Wealthy Consultant is going to go so far because of the strength between the number one and the number two. So I just want to take a moment and highlight you there.
Thank you.
And I just want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure. Anytime we have a conversation, it's wonderful. So I'm glad we could just have a conversation and call it a podcast. It was
there
so
we go.
much fun.
That's how we do things.
Thank
All right,
you.
guys, check it out. Follow Gabe's. See you later. Bye.